Awesome. All right. So, yeah, Page Alcoholic, I'm so glad you guys are here. We were making the joke before. Today, we're going to kick it off on page 104, Two Wives. Don't leave. Don't leave. Hold on. Stick around. Don't run away yet. And so here's the thing. We were joking about like, man, this is I'm sure I'm not alone. And I'm sure we're not alone. We come to this chapter as, Two Wives. I don't like this chapter. Two Wives, it's old, it's outdated. We got to get rid of this chapter. And one of the things that I love about this chapter, bear with me when I say this, I love about this chapter is we get to have a we agnostics experience. We can do a little show of hands for those who are on camera or those who want to participate. You don't have to participate. But anyone here ever come to the big book and read the chapter We Agnostics and be like annoyed by the prosaic steel girder? Annoyed that we're talking about protons? Just pissed right off that we're mentioning Galileo, and what the heck do the Wright brothers have to do with anything? This is stupid. What does this have to do with my alcoholism? Now, we can have another show of hands. Who here would now describe that as their favorite chapter in the book, right? And so I love that we get to come and have a new experience. And what I'm hoping is that we can come to this chapter today and lay aside our old ideas, lay aside our prejudices, and have a new experience. Because there is value, there are promises, there are directions, there is so much. And actually, we're kind of going to be doing some step one review as we go through. So chapter 8, Two Wives. And if you're writing in the book today, what I want you to do, if you want, it's your book, it's not mine, I won't tell you what to do, cross out the word wives. Just cross it out. Because that's the thing, when I go through these later chapters, often I can get stuck in the titles. Two wives. Well, I wasn't a wife. I didn't have a wife. It doesn't apply to me. I get stuck in those ideas of maybe what a wife looked like in the 1930s, and it builds those old ideas. Well, let's cross out two wives and let's write. And now you can write anything you want, but here are some suggestions to those who stay, to those bound to the alcoholic, to those who are untreated codependent, to those who are unable to leave. And when I start to look at this chapter, Two Wives, through the lens of people who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is to alcohol, these suggestions start to make a lot more sense. And we start to see what's really going on. And so one of the things I want to do is I just want to address all the two wives rumors, all the two wives misconceptions. And it's TO, not TWO. You don't get to come to, 12 step and just magically pop two wives. And for some of us who may have had two wives or multiple relationships and that sort of thing, I'm sure we can imagine that's not the gift we think it is, right? More relationships, more problems. So we're not promising any more than any relationships, but this chapter, I just want to point out this chapter, it was written by Bill Wilson. And it was always going to be written by Bill Wilson. He wrote it. He didn't ask his wife Lois to write it. Sometimes we hear in the rooms that Bill was going to ask Ann Smith, Dr. Bob's wife, because she had been involved in the Oxford group for a long time and was really familiar with spiritual principles, that he was going to ask her to write this. And she said no. And so he wrote it instead. But the truth of the matter is he wanted her to write a story in the back of the book. He always had intention for writing this chapter. Now we might hear that and be like, Bill, get off your high horse. Stop, writing things for other people, But when we know that it's Bill that wrote this, and we see that what these suggestions are, we can see that these suggestions are pinpointed for being helpful to the alcoholic. See, Bill really had a singleness of purpose in his life, a singleness of purpose in his writing, and that was to be helpful to drunks. And so that is what this is about. And I might not relate to who this chapter is for. We're going to go through and it's going to see how we affect others, how our alcoholism affects others. And I might, if somebody treated me like that, I'd be like, absolutely not, I'm out. And I might not relate to that. And that's okay. But I also do need to remember that this is the way in which I hurt people with my alcoholism. This is the way that I cause harm. So it says, let's get into it. Let's rock and roll. So it says, with few exceptions, our book thus far has spoken of men. But what we have said applies quite as much to women. Oh, that's good news for someone like me. It says our activities on behalf of women who drink are on the increase. There is every evidence that women regain their health as readily as men if they try our suggestions. What are these suggestions? The 12 steps. Those are the suggestions. And also keep in mind when they're writing this paragraph, anytime in this book we see the words men and women, that was really a hopeful sentence. That was really a hopeful statement. There was at most one woman. They were kind of hoping that this thing could work for a greater variety of the human experience. And so when it says there's every evidence, I mean, it was like two other ones that's actually stuck around after her. You know what I mean? And it says, but for every man, don't worry about man, for every alcoholic who drinks, others are involved. See, and that's the thing, cross out two wives, we can write to those who are involved with alcoholics. That's what we could write as well. See, there's all these different ways that we can approach this title, and the title often holds us back. The wife who trembles in fear of the next debauch, the mother and father who see their son wasting away. Among us are wives, relatives, and friends. So this chapter is to wives, yes, to relatives, yes, to friends, yes, to those who are affected by alcoholism. Welcome to those that just joined. We're on 2 wives. Please don't leave. Stick it out. We're on 104. So glad you're here. And it says, among us are wives and friends whose problem has not, are wives, relatives, and friends whose problem has been solved. We're in the 3rd paragraph, and what we are pointing to is a promise. The promise that is carried throughout this book, recovered. The problem is solved, that I get to be recovered. Recovered does not mean cured, but recovered means that state of neutrality, safe and protected, where the mental obsession has been lifted. I get to be recovered. There are those among us where the wives of family, that problem has been solved. What does that mean? Permanent, contented sobriety for the alcoholic. As well as some who have not yet found a happy solution. We want the wives of Alcoholics Anonymous to address the wives of men who drink too much. What they say will apply to nearly everyone bound by ties of blood or affection to the alcoholic. Now keep in mind, again, to those bound to the alcoholic. In just 1 second, we got something in the chat. And it says, I've been with my wife 29 years, and I've been sober for just under half that time. She's an Al-Anonic. Woo! I love that because it sounds like she's real jazzed about the Al-Anon. Yeah. And she loves that line. We want the wives of Alcoholics Anonymous to address the wives of men who drink too much. And I love that too. And I'm going on a tangent because you put it in the chat. See, I keep my promises. I'll go on tangents. See, that's the thing, is somebody who has this illness, I can help others who have this illness. And we might think 2 wives, this chapter is all about like sit around and knit your cozies or make your doilies and worry and fret about your loved one. No, it is going to implore us to take action, to find this solution and to help people that we can. So this is a weird sentence. I'm privileged to be an alcoholic. I'm privileged to be a drug addict. I'm privileged to be able to work and help people like that. I'm also super duper privileged to qualify for Al-Anon, a little bit codependent over here. You know what I mean? And I get to help people with that. See, and that's what it's going to say later on. That if I am struggling with what we're going to see at the bottom of 104, 105, 106, and top of 107, if I am struggling with the hopelessness of alcoholism and I don't take a drink, what I need to do is go help those who are struggling with alcoholism and do not take a drink. The families, the loved ones, go help them. See, those same suggestions we see throughout the book, they still apply here. And so it says, we want to analyze the mistakes we've made. We want to leave you with the feeling, and I love this, this is another promise, leave you with the feeling that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness too great to be overcome. In Bill's story, it talks about how these 12 steps are a way of life, which answers all our problems, all our problems. It says we have traveled a rocky road, and I don't know about you guys, every time I read that, I think about ice cream. And I wish the terrible disease of alcoholism that tears its way through the lives of others, but I think of ice cream. You know what I mean? That's just how my little brain works, and I thought I'd share that with you. And so as we get into this rocky road that we're traveling, one of the things is this part of the book mirrors what we see on page 31. So before we read what it says at the bottom of page 104, let's pop over to page 31. And I'm real sorry, guys, we're going to be bouncing around this big book a whole lot during this big book study. Like, it is going to just be bouncing. And the reason is because as soon as we see a suggestion in two wives, we think, man, that doesn't apply. I don't like it. But when we see that we're talking about the same things that we were talking about all the way up to and including working with others, we see how it applies. So let's go to page 31. And what we're talking about on page 31, we're going to go to that the second full paragraph here, some of the methods we tried. And in that, what we are going to look at is the ways in which we tried to control our drinking. So we tried, hey, I'm glad you're here. Randomly, we're on page 31, but we're going to pop back over to pop back over to two wives. So it says, here are some of the methods we tried. So here are some of the methods we tried to exert control over our drinking. And what we're trying to see is the powerlessness we have over the allergy. And then we're going to see where we tried to exert some control over the mental obsession. We tried to stay sober on our own willpower, and it didn't work. And so it says, here are some of the methods we tried. And heck, if we're here today, we can do a little thumbs up, show of hands, nods. If we still have reactions and emojis and all that sort of stuff, we can do that. Have we tried this drinking beer only? See, if I'm not an alcoholic, I can switch to beer because my problem was hard liquor. I can drink and it'll be okay if I don't have that allergy. It says limiting the number of drinks. See, if I don't have that allergy, I can stop at 3, I can stop at 5, right? Or I can stop after a night. It says never drinking alone. See, if I don't have that allergy, I can keep pace with you. I can drink with you. And it says never drinking in the morning. See, if I don't have that allergy, if I start in the evening, it won't take off. Never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home. See, if I try to keep it to myself, maybe that allergy won't kick off. Never having it in the house. If I try to drink socially, maybe I don't have that allergy. Never drinking during business hours. Drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, switching my drinks. Or if you're coming to this study, with addiction or other things, switching, that substance, right? Drinking only natural wines, those antioxidants. How could they hurt? You know what I'm saying? It's grapes, antioxidants. It'll be fine, right? And then what we see. So what we're talking about there. See, if I don't have the allergy, if I don't have that thing that sets off in me once I take a drink, it screams at me that I need more. And the more that I drink, the more that I have to drink. If I don't have that, that's going to work. And I can just go and control my drink and drink like a lady. Now, for those that know me, know that I have never in my life drank like a lady, and I've never in my life did anything like a lady. I'm not very ladylike. But if I don't have the allergy, I can do those things, and those things will work. Now we're going to see some attempts to overcome the mental obsession. And if I don't have the mental obsession, these things will work. So it says agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever with and without solemn oath. Have we ever sworn off and said, that's it, I'm never going to drink again, and meant it? And that, the kicker for somebody like me, is that has no effect. And it says taking more physical exercise. Listen, I'm not going to drink. Just going to go to the gym. I've tried something like that. Reading inspirational books. Thank goodness for the Oprah book club, right? Oprah's book club. I'll read those. I'll overcome it, and I won't need to drink. And it says going to health farms and sanitariums. When we see health farm sanitariums, we can think rehabs, detoxes, sober living houses. When it says accepting voluntary commitment to asylums, detoxes, hospitals, emergency rooms. That's what we're talking about. We could increase the list ad infinitum. And see, if I don't have the mental obsession, if I have power over that insane thought that I have when I'm as sober as I am today, those things will work. But I'm an alcoholic, and none of those things work. And you'll notice on page 31, there's a progression. We start from, I'm just going to stick to beer, to going in and out of asylums, in and out of hospitals, in and out of institutions. We see that progression. Now let's pop back over to 104, and we're going to look at those same symptoms, and we're going to see that same progression. Now we're going to take a look at them through a number of different angles. I can see myself as an alcoholic, and I can see the harm that I cause others because of my lack of control and because of my lack of choice. The physical allergy and the mental obsession, I can see those things. But I can also see if I qualify myself as an untreated codependent. I can see if I qualify myself as somebody who maybe qualifies for Al-Anon family groups. See if I have tried and done these things to get somebody to change, to get somebody to do something different, and it has not worked. These suggestions might apply to me. So let's back. Welcome. So glad you're here. Bottom of page 104. It says, we have traveled a rocky road. There's no mistake about that. We have had long rendezvous with hurt pride, frustration, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear. Has that been my experience? Has that been my experience, that I've tried to control other people and get them to do what I think they need to do for their own well-being, for the best motives, tied back to the actor and the director in step 3? Have I done that, and has that not worked, and I've been left with hurt pride, frustrations, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear? And if that's not my experience, that's okay. But as a result of my drinking, or the result of my addiction, or the result of what brings me to the Big Book Compendium study here today, have I caused that in others? And it says, and one of the things is not only like I can watch for these in my life. See, in step 10, it asks that I watch for resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear. And I see that mirrored in the evening review process. And these are manifestations of my selfishness and self-centeredness. So if I'm watching, I'll see these pop up, and I can use step 10 to overcome them, where I pray, where I discuss it with someone, where I make amends and turn my thoughts to someone I can help. And it says, these are not pleasant companions. We know what it's like to live with those and to live under the pain of those. And it says, we have been driven to maudlin sympathy. Now that's that self-pitying, poor me, I need your pity, attention, look at me and what I've been through. And don't you know how hard it is? And I know I've been there. I won't say anyone here else has been in there, but I've been there. And it says, to bitter resentment. So I'm going from extreme to extreme. Poor me to F them, F what that person did to me. Has that been my experience? I go from extreme to extreme. And if that's not my experience, did I cause that in others? And it says, ever hoping that one day our loved ones would be themselves once more. It says our loyalty and the desire that our husbands or whoever it is that we want to fix and save and manage and control, whoever that is, hold up their heads and be like other men, have begotten all sorts of predicaments. We have been unselfish and self-sacrificing. Has that been my experience? Right? And it talks about that again in step 3, right? Where it's like, we're going to show up, we're going to be modest and self-sacrificing, and we're going to look the part, but we're trying to get the outcome that I want. Has that been me? Or have I put people through that? It says, we have told innumerable lies. Innumerable means too many to count, to protect our pride, that ego and image maintenance, and our husband's reputation. Has that been my experience? If that's not my experience, have I put other people through that? We have prayed, we have begged, we have been patient. Has that been my experience, or have I put people through that? We have struck out viciously. We have run away. We have been hysterical. We have been terror-stricken. We have sought sympathy. We have had retaliatory love affairs with other men. Has that been my experience? Or have I put people through this? Now, what I want you to know, if you're reading this and you're thinking, God, no, I wouldn't put up with half of that nonsense, I'd be out of there, then this chapter isn't really necessarily given suggestions for somebody like me. That's somebody that can leave. That's somebody that can leave the relationship. That's somebody that can put it down. Just like if I'm reading those suggestions or those things that we tried on 31, and it's like, I wouldn't need to do any of that. I just don't drink and I'm fine. These suggestions of these 12 steps aren't necessarily for them either. Do you know what I'm saying? And when I see that this chapter is for those that are as hopelessly bound to the alcoholic, the sufferer, as the sufferer is to the substance, that's what we're talking about. See, it's not stick around and twiddle your thumbs and hope something changes. We're talking about the awful nature of this illness and the people that it affects. And they're not able to leave on their own power. And it says, our homes have been battlegrounds many an evening. In the morning, we've kissed and made up. Our friends have counseled chucking them in, and we have done so with finality. Now, do you guys remember the cycle? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that cycle. I'm going to share it on, did that work? Yeah, there we go. I'm going to share it with you. Because what we're going to see is not just the alcoholic cycle, but we're going to see how that alcoholic cycle is mirrored by those who are affected by us. So when it says our friends have counseled chucking the men and we have done so with finality, that is us swearing off. I'm done with that person forever. I'm not going to put up with that ever again. I'm done. And then it says only to be back a little while. Hoping, always hoping. What kicked in that mental obsession? This time will be different. This time they'll be different. This time they'll change. What happened between them and between me saying I'm never going to drink again, or I'm never going to be with that person again, and that mental obsession that said this time will be different. This time this person will be changed. Well, I experienced that restless, irritable discontent. I experienced that acute pain of the separateness from God. And that fuels that insane thought to go back to that thing which has become the source of my pain. And it says, our men have sworn great solemn oaths that they were through drinking forever. So just like I swore off and said, that's it, I am never going to drink again. I'm done. I'm never going to do this again. And I meant it. I meant it. And I'm thrust into sobriety with no solution, and I'm stuck with me. And there's nothing that I can put between me and me. And it's incredibly painful. And the obsession hits, and I think, you know what, I'll fix that, a drink. And I'll be okay. And off I go again. I take that drink and the allergy takes over and I need more. And the more I drink, the more I have to drink. And off I go on that spree and I emerge remorseful, filled with remorse and regret. And I say, that's it. I'm never going to do this again. And we can see how our loved ones go through that same cycle. And you know what we're talking about in step one? If it's a cycle, I can't get off it on my own power. I'm doomed to repeat it. And we can see that same doomed to repeat it. The family goes through when they're saying, I'm not doing this again. I'm going to set boundaries this time. I'm not going to let you treat me this way. And we go through it again and again and again. And just like for the alcoholic, we know the solution lies in a deep and profound experience of God, that spiritual experience. And we have 12 steps to get there. And these 12 steps will work for anyone that'll take them. And so I'll stop the share. We'll go back here. All right. And it says we seldom, that means rarely, had friends. Oh, and so it says we believed them when no one else could or would. And then if in a few days, weeks, or months of fresh outbursts. So going through that cycle again and again, we seldom had friends at our homes, never knowing how or when the men of the house would appear. We could make few social engagements. We came to live almost alone, that isolating and withdrawing. And we're going to see, actually, when we get into a vision for you, that chilling, that vapor that is loneliness, how that settled down, how we withdrew from other human beings. We sought out sorted companions, right? We lead to that isolation, that enmeshment that happens. Now it says, we came to live almost alone. When we were invited out, our husbands sneaked so many drinks, they spoiled the occasion. If on the other hand, they took nothing, their self-pity made them killjoys. Well, I don't know about you guys, but that was me. If you know, like if you in early sobriety, if you ever gone over like a family, you know, it was Mother's Day, maybe you're hanging out for a family thing and people are drinking and you can't drink. And it's like, you call your sponsor and it's like, man, I mean, everyone's drinking and it's not fair. And I'm in that self-pity and that poor me. And yeah. Or I'm sneaking the drinks. Well, it's usually an or, you know, because I got to do one before I do the other, and I'm sneaking those drinks. I want you to know, if I'm sneaking drinks, that's not social drinking. If I got to hide it from people, that's not social drinking. And so welcome to those that just joined us. We're on page 105, very, very, very bottom paragraph. And so it says there was never financial security. Has that been my experience? And did I threaten the financial security of those around me? Was my family and my loved ones financially affected by my alcoholism, by my addiction? It says positions were always in jeopardy or gone. Really didn't stick to that permanent employment. I didn't. I'm not. Some people were able to. I wasn't. And it says an armored car could not have brought the pay envelopes home. The checking account melted like the snow in June. And for those of you who aren't in Canada, sometimes we do get snow in June. So sometimes it happens. But yeah, it would melt quite quickly. And it says sometimes there were other women. How heartbreaking was this discovery? How cruel to be told they understood our men as we did not. The bill collectors, the sheriffs, the angry taxi drivers, the policemen, the bums, the pals, even the ladies they sometimes brought home. Our husbands thought we were so inhospitable. Joy killer, nag, wet blanket. And I will say, if you bring another lady home, I don't think I'm a wet blanket or a nag for being like, dude, that is not cool. That is not cool behavior. But what's the takeaway from this? The depth of my selfishness and self-centeredness, the depth of my illness. I hurt people in ways that are just desperately awful. And we see this progression, right? We see this progression. It gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And again, the same progression affects our family and our loved ones, and they are sticking it out. It gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And just like I'm crossing those lines in the sand. See, that's the thing. We got a Zoom room full of people. I don't think a single one of you, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but I don't think a single one of you is a sociopath. I don't think a single one of you wanted to do things like this. I don't think a single one of you wanted to hurt people in the way that you hurt people in the way that I hurt people, did the things that we did, and tear it apart, those sweet affections that tore apart our lives and the lives around us. I don't think you wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it. And again, what we're talking about is the power of alcoholism, that I am powerless over this. I am drinking against my will. I'm tearing apart my life and the lives of those around me against my will. That is alcoholism. And the people around me are staying, even though they know they ought not to, even though I'm tearing them apart. The power of this illness. That's what we're talking about. And it says that's what they said. The next day they would be themselves again, and we would try to forgive and forget. We have tried to hold the love of our children for their father. We have told small tots that father was sick. And when we see that word sick, we might think sick has these modern connotations of weird or twisted or bad or wrong. But we're talking about ill, operating from a place of deep pain. And that is not to condone this behavior. See, when I'm talking, we're going to read this, and this is a hard read, and I admit that. But we're not condoning that with our alcoholism. What we do is we go and we set right these wrongs. That's what we do. We dive into this work and this way of life, and we set right these wrongs. And these are not easy wrongs to set right. These are not easy harms to amend, but we amend them. That's what we're called to do. And you see, honestly, it's when I've gone through my amends, this chapter becomes an easier read. It really does. But it's hard when I've got that amends staring me in the face and I know I hurt somebody like that. It says we have told small tots that father was sick, which was much nearer the truth than we realized. They struck the children, kicked out door panels, smashed treasured crockery and ripped the keys out of pianos. See, I do things that I would never do. I become somebody I never wanted to become. This illness is awful. It's awful. But my responsibility is to live this way of life so I don't fall victim to the inevitability of that first drink. That's what's asked of me, to work these steps like my life depends on it, and like the quality of my family's life depends on it, because it does. It says in the midst of such pandemonium, they may have rushed out, threatening to live with the other woman forever. In desperation, we have even got tight ourselves, the drunk to end all drunks. The unexpected result was that her husband seemed to like it. So I don't know if I talked about this, but the first time I was ever introduced to 12-step, it wasn't because I had a problem. I can assure you when I got here, I was not an alcoholic, absolutely not. Well, let me tell you who's the alcoholic. It's my boyfriend. He's 16 years older than me and had been drinking the whole 16-year age difference. And if you're wondering, that is a sign of my own unresolved daddy issues. And I definitely don't have alcoholism because I don't experience what he experienced. And what he experiences is seizures. He has alcoholic seizures in the morning, and I don't have that. So I'm fine. Now, there's a line in Dr. Bob's Nightmare where he's like, for some reason, we alcoholics have a knack for picking out the world's finest women. And I'm like, why, yes, they do. Me, right? And it took me a while to get to, maybe I wasn't as fine a woman as I thought, but I remember reading through Two Wives. And that line, in desperation, we've even got tighter selves, the drunk to end all drunks. I'm drinking at his alcoholism. And it resonated. And all I'm saying is that perhaps it might have been a red flag. I should have maybe just had a look at that, right? And so it says, perhaps at this point we got a divorce and took the children home to father and mother. See, again, that is the swearing off. That's it. I'm not going to do this again. I'm done with them forever. Then we were severely criticized by our husband's parents for desertion. See, it's hard to give up on people and feel like we're giving up on people, right? And so what happens is I think I have power, and I don't have any power. See, to know alcoholism is to know that I am beyond human aid, and all I am is human power. And so there's something in the chat, and I'm going to make sure I read it. Yeah, I started flirting to see if I still got it. I don't. That's awesome. Right? Yeah. And I am beyond human power. So that usually we did not leave. And see, that's the thing. Usually we did not leave. We weren't able to end the relationship. We weren't able to cut them off, whether it's a friend, a family, a parent, a child, a loved one. We weren't able to do it. We stayed on and on, just like we continued to go through the cycle ourselves. We finally sought employment ourselves as destitution faced us and our families. We're starting to see how dire this situation is. We began to ask medical advice as the sprees got closer together. And that's that thing with that cycle. See, the more times I go around that cycle, that worse that spiritual malady gets, and that pain that I'm in, and that louder that mental obsession gets. And I believe that line off I go. See, the more times I go around that cycle, it seems like the faster I go. And we can kind of see that looking at our relapse history, right? Or maybe that's your experience. And it says the alarming mental and physical symptoms, the deepening pull of remorse, depression, and inferiority that settled down on our loved ones. So I remember what it was like to be at that place of remorse, depression, and inferiority, and knowing that something had me, but I didn't know what it was. It says these things terrified and distracted us. As animals on a treadmill, we have patiently and wearily climbed, falling back in exhaustion after each futile effort to reach solid ground. There's that Greek story, that Greek tale of Sisyphus, I believe. And he's the gentleman who, through his ego defied the gods, or, said, I can do anything, something like that. And he was compelled to push that boulder up a mountain. And if he was able to push the boulder up to the top of the mountain, he would be free. And what would happen is he would push the boulder and get to the top, and it would tumble down. And that is my experience as an alcoholic. See, I would push this boulder of trying to stay sober on my own power. I would push it up and push it up and push it up, and it would tumble down, and I would relapse and I would drink again. And that's what happens for the untreated Al-Anon, the untreated codependent. Just as I'm trying to stay away from the first drink, they're trying to keep me away from the first drink. And they're using all their willpower and all their might and all their force to push my sobriety up that mountain, that boulder. And it doesn't work. They think they're getting close, and it falls down, and I drink again. And that's what we're up against. It's Sisyphus. I can't get it up the mountain. I can't get that boulder up. I need God's power. God's power is required for my sobriety. That human power is not enough. And it says most of us have entered the final stage with its commitments to health resorts, sanitariums, hospitals, and jails. rehabs, detoxes, psych wards, emergency rooms, jails, prison, penitentiary, those sorts of places. There was sometimes there was screaming delirium and insanity. Death was often near. Now, if you remember earlier on in our book, it says, the alcoholic gets into. We pursue this insanity, this illusion that somehow, some way I can control and enjoy my drink, and we pursue that into the gates of insanity or death. I think I'm an up to sort of drinker, but I'm into insanity or death. See, if I have this thing, I don't really get to decide how bad it's going to be. That's alcoholism. If I have a window of willingness to take these actions, these 12 steps, if I have that window now, I better take it, because I don't know if it'll ever open again. And so now that mirrors what we see on page 31. And now it kind of gets into some directions. And I'll be honest with you guys, we are going to bounce around. Like, it's going to get a little disorienting. So please bear with me. Because again, I want to mirror what it's saying on page 107 with what it's saying in the rest of the book. That these aren't new ideas. These are the same ideas that are continued through. It says, under these conditions, we naturally made mistakes. Some of them rose out of ignorance of alcoholism. And you know what? I came to Alcoholics Anonymous as an alcoholic once I realized he was not the problem, that I was the problem. Once I overcame that, I came with alcoholism. And I had my own ignorance of alcoholism. And there are things that, we say that make sense, or that we repeat, or that we hear in the rooms that make sense to non-alcoholics. And it sounds like it should make sense to an alcoholic. Things like play the tape to the end. Start your drinking at the end. And if you haven't remembered your last drink, you're doomed to have your first. Those sorts of things. Call before you drink. He must not have hit his bottom. He must not have wanted enough. None of that is true. None of that is true. See, the reality is I am beyond human aid. I don't have the power to play the tape to the end. I don't have the power to call before I drink. Yes, sometimes I can. On page 24, it tells me that there will be moments when I can't. And it's the moments that I drink again. Those are the moments that matter. I kind of make that joke. It's a little like a birth control or a parachute or a fire extinguisher. It's not the moments that work that matter. It's the moments that don't, I am beyond human aid. And it says, sometimes we sense dimly that we were dealing with sick men. Had we fully understood the nature of the alcoholic illness, we might have behaved differently. It talks about some of these preconceived notions. I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? And so I might approach two wives with preconceived notions about this chapter. Like, I can leave a toxic relationship. Why can't that person, right? Somebody ever treated me like that, I'd leave. Just like, she's such a sweet girl. I think he'd stop for her sake, right? Misconceptions and understandings of what we're up against. And it says, how could men who love their wives and children be so unthinking, so callous, so cruel? There could be no love in such persons, we thought. And just as we were being convinced of their heartlessness, they would surprise us with fresh resolves and new attentions. And see, that's the thing. The things that I do because of my selfishness, my self-centeredness, the things I do because of the mental obsession, the things I do because of the physical allergy, that is not me. Just one of those cool God coincidences. I was working with somebody in Two Wives a little before the Big Book study. And she was sharing with me that she's becoming the person that she really, truly believes that God wants her to be. And that's not the person that causes the pain on 106 and 107. That is the stuff that falls for me as I take these actions. Those are the things, that selfishness, that self-centeredness, that mental obsession, that stuff falls as I work this program. That's not who I am. Who I am is a child of God. And so there could be no love in such persons, we thought, and just as we were being convinced of their heartlessness, they would surprise us with fresh resolves and new attentions. For a while, they would be their old sweet selves, only to dash the new structure of affection to pieces once more. So we're going to bounce around. We're talking about how we would build it up and tear it down. Let's pop over to page 21. And where we're at is in the where we're going to look at on page 21 is in the description of the real alcoholic. And if we go to the near the bottom of the page, when it talks about how he's perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. My dishonesty and my selfishness, that's how I hurt people on 106, 107, 105, 104. It says he often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. See what we're talking about there in 107, and you can make that note to go see page 21, and you could make that note to see page 107. What we're talking about is that same thing. And why would somebody like me build it up and then tear it down? The mental obsession. I do not have the ability to choose whether I will drink or not, because I wouldn't tear it down. So going back to page 107, we're going to bounce around. I'm so sorry. It says, as why they would commence to drink again, they would reply with some silly excuse or none. It was so baffling, so heartbreaking. Could we have been so mistaken in the men we married? Now you can make a little note to see page 37, and what we can do is pop over to page 37. We're going to get dizzy with all this bouncing around. So let's pop over to page 37. And we're going to start with the second full paragraph where it says, you may think. And it says, you may think this is an extreme case. We're talking about Jim. He suddenly put the whiskey in his milk. He got a case of the suddenlies, had no mental defense against the first drink. Now, keep in mind, we see Jim putting the whiskey in the milk, and we're like, ew, that's gross. And we forget that things like White Russians and Kahlua exist, right? Lots of milk, alcoholic beverages with milk in them. Anywho, it says, to us, it is not far-fetched for this kind of thinking. And the thinking that we are describing as the mental obsession has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. But there was always the curious mental phenomenon that, parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea went out. The next day, we could ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. See, that baffled on 37 is as baffled on page 107. And what it's talking about on page 37, and it's in my mind, I have two thoughts, and those two thoughts are running a race. And the one thought is, I don't want to drink. I don't want to hurt my family. I don't want to do it again. I want to be sober. And the other thought is, this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. And they're running a race. And I want you to know, if given enough time for the race to continue, the insane thought will inevitably win. The mental obsession will always win the race. A relapse is inevitable. If I do not treat my alcoholism with a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Let's pop over back to page 107. One more in this paragraph, only one more bounce around in this paragraph, and then we'll stay on 107 for a little bit. So it says, when drinking, they were strangers. Sometimes they were so inaccessible that it seemed as though a great wall had been built around them. Right? I keep people out, and the people closest to me, I don't want to let them know anything about my drinking. I don't want them to tell me anything about my drinking. You can make a little note to see page 18, and let's pop over to page 18. And on page 18, so on page 18, we see the italics, but the ex-problem drinker, we go up one paragraph where it says, highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. See, I'm not honest with doctors. I'm not honest with therapists. I'm not honest with addictions counselors. But even more so, it says, strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. Those closest to me are those that I keep furthest away. And see, I'm trying, and oftentimes I'm doing that with the best motives. I don't want them to know. Of course, I don't want them to do anything about my drinking or get too close, but I think I'm protecting them. But even in that, I'm causing them harm because they feel that wall. They feel that distance. Let's roll back to 107. And it says, if, and even if, very bottom paragraph of 107, and even if they did not love their families, how could they be so blind about themselves? I cannot choose whether I will drink or not. I have the mental obsession. What had become of their judgment, their common sense, their willpower? When it comes to not taking that first drink, I have none of it, even though I have it in other areas of my life, none of it works in the long run against that first drink. I have the mental obsession. Why could they not see that drink meant ruin to them? I have this strange mental blank spot. I have the mental obsession. When I'm as sober as I am today, I believe the lie that this time will be different, and off I go. Why was it when these dangers were pointed out, they agreed and got drunk again immediately? See, the crux of my problem is, as an alcoholic, is not that once I start to drink, I can't control the amount that I take. The crux of my problem is I can relate to all of these things. I love my family. In all other areas, I have judgment, common sense, and willpower. I can see that drink means ruin. I can see that the dangers of alcoholism, they can be pointed out, and I will drink again. And that's what it means to drink against my will. That's what I'm up against. I will relapse, knowing all those things. Heck, I could draw that cycle out from memory. And if I don't continue to grow my spiritual awakening, I will drink again. That's the powerlessness of this thing. And it says, these are some of the questions which race through the mind of every woman who is an alcoholic husband. Welcome, we're on page 108, the first full paragraph. It says, we hope this book has answered some of them. Perhaps your husband has been living in that strange world of alcoholism where everything is distorted and exaggerated. You know that world? It's all distorted and exaggerated. And heck, that can happen to me sober. When I get into self, that bondage of self, the world can get distorted and it can get exaggerated. And it says you can see that he really does love you with his better self. See, at the core of who I am, I don't want to do this. It says, of course, there is such a thing as incompatibility, but in nearly every instance, the alcoholic only seems to be unloving and inconsiderate. It is usually because he is warped and sickened by the physical allergy and the mental obsession that he says and does these appalling things. And I can have that same warped by that bondage of self, living in that place of spiritual malady. And if I live there long enough, I'll take that drink. It says today, most of our men are better husbands and fathers than ever before. It's not like the firmest of promises, because it's saying most, not all, but it's a promise, right? And that what it's saying too is that who I can be is the person I always wanted to be. And now let's go down to that next paragraph. It says, try not to condemn your alcoholic husband, no matter what he says or does. I don't know about you. Can anyone here go to a meeting and not fall into judgment of somebody that's not our spouse? You know what I mean? I can't even do that on my own power. You're asking me, I got to not condemn my alcoholic husband, the person that knows all the buttons and pushes them? What? And it says he is just another very sick and unreasonable person. Again, sick meaning from pain, ill. Treat him when you can as though he had pneumonia. When he angers you, remember that he is very ill. Let's make a little note in our book to see page 67. See, I can't do this on my own power. It tells me how I treat people who are sick on page 67. And what we're going to go through is that what we often call the sick man prayer. Top of page 67, this is what we do before we get into our fourth column of resentment. It says, though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. It says we asked, anytime in this book I see the words we ask, that is a prayer. We ask God to help us, show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. See, that's the thing. I can't overcome self with self. I can't overcome resentment with self. I need God's help. So when it says, try not to condemn your alcoholic husband, I can't do that on my own power. I need the power of God. And it is these steps and the directions of these steps that allow me to access that power. Going back to page 108, it says, and this is, I'm real sorry, this is not even our last bounce around, but we're rounded up, we're almost there. It says, there is an important exception to the foregoing. We realize that some men are thoroughly bad intentioned, and no amount of patience will make any difference. An alcoholic of this temperament may be quick to use this chapter as a club over your head. Don't let him get away with it. If you are positive he is one of this type, you may feel you would better leave. Now keep in mind, if somebody does not want to get well, they do not want to take these actions. It's not saying stick it out if stick it out because we think you need to stick it out. We're saying leave. But again, we talked about how I can't leave on my own power, how I'm as condemned to stay as the alcoholic is condemned to drink. And it says, don't let him get away with it. Yeah, don't be in the clown. Don't blame the clown for being a clown. Have a look at yourself for keep going back to the circus. And I can't stop myself from going back to the circus. I can't. I need God. And the circus is a beautiful metaphor, because if you've ever heard that saying, like, this is not dating advice at all. I want to bear with me with this. But here's the thing. When you're wearing rose-colored glasses, red flags just look like flags. And I thought it was a carnival. You know what I'm saying? That is not a sane, sound sex ideal. We develop that, and then we pray around that, and we let God lead us to that. All right. It says, but you may, if you feel he is one of this type, you may feel you had better leave. Is it right to let him ruin your life and the lives of your children? So the book is not saying stay. The book is saying you're going to stay from your own experience. But if you're able to leave and this person isn't open or willing to take in spiritual action, go. And it says, especially when he has before him a way to stop his drinking and abuse. We have a solution. There is a solution. And it says, if he really wants to pay the price. Let's make a note in our book to see page 14, because what is the price that I need to pay as an alcoholic? So let's pop over to page 14. And we'll wrap up on this. It's the very first paragraph, and I love this paragraph. Page 14. It says, simple but not easy to achieve the spiritual awakening, right? To have that spiritual awakening that I grow, that I maintain. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. This is the price that I have to pay. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the capital F, capital L, Father of light, who presides over us all. That is what is asked of me if I want to pay the price. I need to destroy that self-centeredness. And how I do it is through the work of these 12 steps. And I want you to know that when I'm coming up against paying that price, that seems like a hefty price. But once I begin to pay it, I realize I was giving away that which was holding me back. So we'll wrap it up there, and we'll continue our rock and rolling in 2 Wives next week. Thank you for joining.